So, you've probably heard this phrase, child poverty, and you might know the situation in the UK is serious. But what does that really mean? In this explainer, we're going to dig into the facts behind the figures to understand just how big this problem is and what it actually looks like for the kids living through it. Let's get into it. All right, so to really get our heads around this, we have to start with the sheer scale of the issue. Let's kick things off with the one big number that really frames this whole conversation. And here it is, 4.5 million. According to the latest government data, that's how many children in the UK are living in what's called relative poverty after you factor in housing costs. Basically, their family's income is way below the national average. But, a number that massive can be hard to picture. What does it actually look like in the real world? Well, the Child Poverty Action Group gives us this incredible way to visualize it. Think about an average school classroom with 30 kids. 9 of them, 9, are living in poverty. Just pause and think about your own school or a classroom you know. Nearly a third of those kids could be going home to a family that's really struggling to make ends meet. And here's the kicker. This isn't just a problem, it's a growing one. A UK Parliament report confirms that this figure, 4.5 million, is the highest it has ever been since they started keeping track back in the mid-90s. So we're talking about a crisis that's reaching levels we've literally never seen before. Okay, so we've got that huge number locked in. But what does poverty actually feel like for a kid, day to day? There's actually another government measurement that helps us get a much clearer picture of the real-world impact. It's a term called deep material poverty, and it's a really interesting way of looking at things because it goes beyond just income and bank accounts. It looks at whether a family can actually afford the absolute basics, the things most of us would say you just can't do without. It's a way of measuring real, tangible hardship. So, how many kids are we talking about here? Well, the number is staggering. It's 2 million. That's 1 in every 7 children across the entire UK. 1 in 7 kids living without things we all consider essential. And that brings up a pretty obvious question, right? What does the government actually count as an essential item? What are these things that a child shouldn't have to live without? Let's take a look. So this list comes straight from the official government report. And just look at some of these things. A warm home, 3 meals a day, fresh fruit every day, a quiet place to do your homework. Remember those 2 million children? Their families can't afford at least 4 of these things that many of us just take for granted. This is the tough reality behind the statistics. Now, while poverty can technically affect anyone, the data shows us something really important. The risk is not spread out evenly. So who is being hit the hardest? It turns out some groups of children are way more likely to experience it. Let's start by looking at disability. Government data shows that a child in a family with a disabled member has a 22% chance of being in deep material poverty. For families without a disabled member, that number drops to 8%. That is a massive difference, and it really shows the extra financial pressures these families are under. Okay, now what about single-parent families? According to the Child Poverty Action Group, 43% of children living in lone parent families are in poverty. That's nearly half. Let that number sink in for a second. And this isn't just a faceless statistic. Listen to this quote. It's from a report by the charity Gingerbread, from a single parent named Sharon. It just shows that even for parents who are working really hard, the economic pressure can be absolutely overwhelming. Ethnicity is another huge factor here. The data shows that children from ethnic minority backgrounds are almost twice as likely to be in deep material poverty compared to those from white households. This points to a really deep-seated inequality in who's carrying the heaviest burden of financial hardship in the country. And finally, let's look at family size. The risk of deep material poverty nearly doubles for families that have 3 or more children. That means more than a fifth of all kids in these larger families are going without those basic essentials we just talked about. So when you see all these numbers, it's natural to ask, does it have to be this way? Is this just inevitable? How does the way the UK supports families stack up against other developed countries? Well, a major report from UNICEF looked at exactly this, and what they found is pretty eye-opening. They ranked the UK near the very bottom among wealthy nations for its family-friendly policies. This suggests that specific policy choices, decisions being made, are a really key part of this story. Let's just zoom in on one specific example, childcare. In the UK, it's mostly a private system, and it can cost a family well over £1,000 every single month. But if you look at a country like Norway, they treat childcare completely differently. They see it as a public good, something everyone should have access to. So the government heavily subsidizes it to keep it affordable. And this is all part of what's often called the Nordic model. It's a system that's built on ideas like generous, well-paid leave for new parents and universal access to high-quality childcare. The whole goal is to support families and make it easier for parents, especially mothers, to be part of the workforce. Okay, let's take a breath. We have covered a ton of ground here, from those huge headline-grabbing numbers right down to the very personal realities of what poverty feels like. Let's try and pull it all together. So if you remember anything, remember this. 4.5 million children are in poverty, and that's a record high. 1 in 7 kids is missing out on basic essentials. The burden falls hardest on certain groups, which points to some big systemic issues. And finally, other countries show us that different choices can lead to very, very different outcomes for families. So, I want to leave you with this thought. All the official data we've looked at defines poverty by listing what children are missing, what they lack. But what if we flip that around? Forget surviving for a moment. What do you believe are the absolute essentials that every single child needs, not just to get by, but to truly thrive? That's something for all of us to think about.